So, welcome to today's Bible study. We're looking into, for Lent even, we're looking into Luke 6 and 7. Um, so, first of all, at the very beginning of 6, it shows that Jesus is Lord over the Sabbath. He's doing things that he shouldn't be doing. He's eating grains on the fields, picking them. And then he heals a man. And that's against the rules of the Sabbath. And he says something along the lines of, is it bad to do good on the Sabbath? And therefore healing is good, therefore it's okay to heal. And just showing that he has that authority to do it. But then we go into 12 to 16, which is what I quite like. Is he goes to pick the 12 apostles, but he doesn't just pick them. He's got hundreds of disciples at this time. He doesn't just pick the apostles. He goes up to a mountain to think about it, to pray, to listen to God. Now, he's the Son of God, but he still goes up and listens to God and listens for a whole night. We struggle to listen to God. We struggle to spend 10, 15, 20 minutes, maybe even half an hour. And yet Jesus is the Son of God, and he spends a whole night listening to who he should have as disciples. And now that's something we should really think about, is how much time we actually spend with God. Should we try and increase it? Well, we all should try and increase it, but do we actually spend enough time as it is? In this in these strange times, are you spending enough time with God? If you're not going to work, you could replace that commute time to just spending some time with God, with laying down, sticking some worship music on, or even in silence and just thinking nothing, trying to think of nothing, and just listening to what God has to say to you. And then he goes and picks these 12 people, these 12 apostles, and you'd expect he'd be picking the intellectual of them, the ones that are really intelligent, the ones that can read, write, but he doesn't necessarily do that. We don't know about all of the apostles, but some of them were fishermen, and fishermen probably wouldn't be the best people, would be the most intellectual of people. You've then got taxmen as well, and they weren't that popular. You don't get popular taxmen who knock on your door asking for money every time. So he hasn't picked the ones that you would expect, but he's spent this night listening to God about who he should be picking. Without going into bits of the kind of parts of the Sermon on the Mount, which are there just to kind of remind the disciples, that all the hundreds of disciples that are following him, that this is how you should do things, that you shouldn't, you should look at yourselves before judging other people. You should love your enemies, and all sorts of things like that. And one of my favourite stories or parables is the house on the sand and stone. I think it really shows that you have to have the faith, that a person building a house on the sand is someone that has no faith, whereas a person who's built a house on the stone has the faith, that they have the faith that they won't get washed away. And if you put your house, your life on God and trust in him and have the faith in him, that at times you may be a bit rocky, but it will never get washed away, that you'll always have someone there. So we go into 7, which the first bit that Jesus heals the servant's soldier, Jesus heals the soldier's servant even. I think I said that wrong the first time. Um, this really shows faith. The soldier is so faithful. They actually send people go on his behalf, and then he sends a second group of people being like, no, don't bother to come to me, Jesus. You can do it from where you are. And he heals from where he is. And Jesus actually makes a massive point out of this, about saying that he's never seen anyone with this much faith anywhere, even in Israel. And that's verse 9. And that's quite amazing that this soldier doesn't even want Jesus to come to him. And then he kind of we skip a bit more, Jesus brings a man back to life, which is amazing. Again, to try and show faith. And then John the Baptist's disciples come to him, and they ask, are you really Jesus? So he does a healing session in front of all of them, to prove who he is, relating back to the Old Testament. And so they went back to John the Baptist to say, oh yeah, he could actually do everything that it says in the Old Testament that he can do. But yeah, that's all showing that if we put our faith in God, then God's with us. And that's what we should be doing, is showing our faith and trusting in how it all works.